as much as I love Inception and I think it is a better movie, I think I enjoy this one more.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of A Lost Plot, the podcast by storytellers for storytellers, so that we can tell better stories ourselves. As always, I'm your host, Maverick, and today we have back with us our two co-hosts, Avalon and Andrew, to review a classic in the Christopher Nolan universe. That's right, we're talking about The Prestige, the 2006 science fiction psychological thriller, which was written and directed by Christopher Nolan, with the screenplay also assisted in being produced by his brother Jonathan. It's based on the book The Prestige by Christopher Priest. If you know anything about Christopher Nolan, you know that there is some accolades that he has. I'm very excited for The Odyssey to come out later this year, so it's no surprise to anyone that I am generally a fan of Christopher Nolan's work. We'll see if that's the case today, though. Avalon, what is your initial impression and rating for The Prestige?
Oddly enough, I've seen quite a bit of Christopher Nolan's work in the past. This is one of those movies I hadn't actually seen until this viewing. There are some things that were classic, but there's other things that are like, okay, that actually was different from what I was expecting. It managed to... There was a few things that actually did surprise me story-wise about this movie, so I'll admit that this movie did manage to do that. So, I mean, nice. I enjoyed it. This is definitely one of the better entries in Christopher Nolan's lineup, in my opinion. So, I gave it a 7.45.
Okay, there you go. That's some pretty high praise. If you know, out of the 9 points rating system that we use, 7.5 is quite a good rating for us. So that's no small feat. Andrew, what was your initial impression and rating for this film?
Initial impression? I was impressed. Going into this, I knew there was a plot twist. There were a couple of things that... It was like, there were certain points in the film where you knew a twist was coming, but I think the twist was... They foreshadowed it just enough that you knew it was coming, but not enough that you could tell exactly where it was going, if that makes sense. So I think it does the plot twist really well. I really like this film. I like a lot of Christopher Nolan films. I think Tenet might be the worst one, which is not even that bad compared to most of what we're getting today. Me personally, not sure how I'm feeling about The Odyssey. I'll save my thoughts for it when it comes out. But I'd put this one pretty high up there in terms of how good it is. I filled out my rating, and by the time I was done, I ended up with an 8.95.
Wow.
There you go. Wow, almost perfect, Andrew. That's
the
crazy.
only thing that held it back was I was sitting there thinking about movies I would or have given a perfect score, and Gladiator is the only one currently that has a 9.0. And I couldn't give it absolute perfection.
Oh, that's hilarious. You're like, oh, well, we can't give it the perfect score.
I couldn't think of, like, any major flaws. There were, like, a couple of, like, tiny little things I would have tweaked. And when I'm watching Gladiator, I never have that. I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is so good. I could watch this over and over again. So... That's the only, like, just the small little things is what knocked it down. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm glad that you enjoyed it. I definitely found that this is not the first time I've watched this film, but even rewatching it, there's a lot of rewatchable value to this film. I think watching it for the second time and seeing all of the things that they are foreshadowing and how well they do that from even the very start of the film, from some of the first lines that characters say, you just realize, oh shoot, they have been saying some of these things from the start and you don't even know it if you haven't seen it before. So it's just, and there's some other almost like meta things that Christopher Nolan does in this film that just boosted my appreciation for this film eons above a lot of the films that we've reviewed recently in here, or even ones that we still think are good. Like this one is high in the rating system for me as well, and there is a very, very good reason for that. With all of that being said, my rating for this was an 8.45. So this is definitely one of the highest ratings I've given on this podcast, and I think that there is a very, very good reason for that. And I think the only other ones that we've reviewed on this podcast is probably Oppenheimer and Interstellar at this point. We will get, and The Black Knight, the Dark Knight, excuse me, and the Dark Knight trilogy as a whole. So those all got good ratings from me as well. I don't know that any of them reached this high in regards to my rating review system from Christopher Nolan. So this is, as of yet, the highest rating I think I've given to a Christopher Nolan film. It's very good. If you have not seen this film, we're going to get into spoilers here. There is no doubt about that. You don't want to spoil it for yourself. It is well worth the watch. So please do yourself the great honor of watching this film before spoiling it, and then come back and listen to this, because there is no doubt that you will be very happy you went along for the ride. So, with all that being said, Avalon, for those who are unfamiliar and decided to push through anyways, can you tell them what The Prestige is all about?
The Prestige is about two friends turned rivals who are magicians in I guess it's sort of not Victorian London, just that era, like late 1800s, early 1900s, sort of.
Yeah, the movie's set in the 1890s.
Yeah. So I mean, there is electricity and some technology, but it's still like you've got horse-drawn carriages and everything. But essentially, these two magicians used to work together. A tragedy turned them into rivals, and then the movie follows more or less their journeys as they try to outdo one another with their own magic tricks, and also how they sabotage each other intentionally with in their different acts. And it all comes to a head, more or less. So, yep. Also, it's not told well. It's not linear, the story. It jumps around quite a bit.
Yes.
So.
If you were to read the plot summary online versus the actual experience of the film, they're not going to quite align, because the story goes back and forth between what happened in the present and then what happened previously, and you slowly get the gleanings of it. Not in the same way as other films that we reviewed, like Memento, which is basically in reverse, but in a lot of ways it has that back and forth that helps to add context as you progress through the story.
Yeah. Well, it actually is almost like it has two timelines what's going forward, like in the past and the present, where it's like it's following two different what's going on in the present, but you don't know what happened in the past. It keeps jumping back and telling the events of the past, going slowly forward. But then it jumps around and shows different scenes at different points too. So it's not completely linear either in those two instances.
Yeah. And I think in regards to doing that, Christopher Nolan does that very well as a general rule in a lot of the movies that he makes. So this one is no exception to that. With that being said, let's get into that opening scene. You see, it starts off with an opening scene that pans across all these images of these top hats. And then there's a man downstairs from an act piece on a stage who's stuck in a water tank drowning. And you see another gentleman trying to get him out. Instead, he gets imprisoned. And you see a court case surrounding this man and whether or not he killed the person who is in the water tank. What are you guys' thoughts about the opening of this film? All of those interesting scenes, along with the monologue at the beginning explaining how a magic trick works. There is the pledge, the turn, and the prestige. Avalon, what are your thoughts?
I don't know why this opening didn't grip me as much, and maybe it's because I have seen this sort of opening up before. It's like, okay, it was starting with a crime, and we're shown a court case. Okay, he's on trial, this one character. So I mean, I've seen movies where that's kind of set up as like, okay, this is a court case. We're seeing like, did this guy actually commit the crime? Is more or less the premise almost of that kind of opening. Now that being said, this is a magician movie. Like, you expect there to be illusions, you expect there to be tricks. You know that not everything is going to be like clearly presented. There's going to be illusions and lies and other things going on. So like, you can't believe everything that you first see. Is like, you already know that going into this movie. So, and even this opening, like, because this is a magic trick, you know, okay, did he actually kill him? Did he not kill him? What is actually happening here? So, I mean, it does set up some, like, so it's not a bad opening. Definitely sets up some interest and intrigue. It's like, okay, what's going on? But for some reason, it did not grab me as much as I thought it would. So, which is odd. But so I didn't give it full points for the opening, but it didn't get low points either. So, just
Yeah, I mean, and you get a couple of things at the beginning where you have the top hats, which is clearly foreshadowing some elements of what's going to happen later. You get the statements between the John Connolly. Wait, what's the character's name? John Cutter, excuse me.
Cutter,
Michael Caine's character. He's the assistant to Angier, one of the magicians in this film, and he starts off trying to explain what he saw when it came to the death of this magician. And he says he's indicating that he has to have been killed, but then they go, well, then we know this is a magician. We know he was doing a magic trick. How do you know this? And then instead of telling you the answer of how that happened, he goes, well, I can't reveal the secrets of the magician. And then they kind of leave that to the side. And then you have to go, well, okay, how was he doing the magic trick then? How did this magic trick go awry? And so they give you some of those hints at the beginning, and then they don't fully reveal them until later on in the film. And so part of that journey is figuring out how they got to this moment. And they just leave a bunch of tidbits there that you don't necessarily know the answer to. I personally enjoyed it. I think it's kind of interesting that you didn't get that emotional grip that I always find. But then again, I was also looking for all that foreshadowing from the start on this review. So I think maybe I'm a little biased in regards to my thoughts. Andrew, did you have different takes on this? What were your impression at the opening of this?
I really like the opening. I think, one, it does what the opening needs to do. It establishes characters. It establishes the world. It gets you invested with the different shots that you're not sure of what you're looking at, where you're looking at, or when you're looking at, by the fact that they're jumping around. And so you're immediately invested by just the nature of the fact that you're trying to figure out what's going on. Secondarily, I think they do an amazing job with the foreshadowing in this film, because it's not just foreshadowing in the sense of like, oh, they're dropping hints. It's foreshadowing in such a way that it mirrors the themes and the ideas in the film, which is like the ideas of sleight of hand. Is that they're throwing these ideas in your face, but doing it in such a way that you do not suspect it. So like, take the diary, for instance. One thing, like, as I'm thinking back through this over the course of like the evening after watching it and the next day, the opening line of the diary is, "We were two young men," which is just like, he's throwing it in your face, this twist that happens later, and we can get to that later, or we can get to it now. I don't much mind. And then you also have the opening line, "Are you watching closely?" which is just like, it's what's the Now You See Me movies. They're pretty mid-tier when it comes to magician movies, I think, at least in comparison to this one. But you get the idea of like, the closer or the harder you're looking, I don't know the exact line, but it's like, the more you pay attention, the less you're going to notice, or something of that nature. And this movie does that. It's like, it's basically asking you to look at everything that's going on, and it's throwing everything in your face. And so you're sitting there going, well, I don't know. So the plot twists are just phenomenal in here. Of course, it's never going to beat Attack on Titan, but you know, it comes pretty darn close. There, huh? I think, yeah, the plot twists are just done in such a way that, like, there was a point in the movie where I was pretty convinced there was going to be some form of cloning or duplication of this guy. I didn't know if it was going to be a double. I didn't know if it was going to be... there was a point where I thought it was going to be a brother, and then once they introduced the cloning, I kind of threw that idea out the window. And then it ended up being his brother, and I was like, oh, okay, well... Okay.
Okay.
We can get to the cloning thing later. But, yeah, I thought the opener was great.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
also
even
just
going off
showing
that
you so
idea-
many images that are going to be so relevant later on.
Yeah. Well, even going off of that initial impressions, right? You're talking about magicians here, people who make their living off of some level of deceit, right? And so from the start, you're given this premise of who is telling the truth, especially when death is on the line, and you're talking about, is someone committing a crime? There's going to be doubt from the start, and so you're trying to figure out the truth in the midst of deceit is just intriguingly a strong premise as you go about these people's lives, and you see that they themselves from the start quickly devolve into these people who are going to take nefarious actions to get what they want. So I think that the different elements they have just lead to these conclusions that you as the audience are trying to figure out what's going on. And in some ways, they have things that are in your face and you can't see the forest for the trees because you're looking so intently at the trees. And that's one of the things that they do just so well in this film, is that, it clearly Occam's razor can't be true in this scenario. It just can't be. But maybe it is. So I think that there's just so many great things that they do in regards to that. And you got a little sneak peek about that spoiler. So sorry if you didn't watch it. That's on you. We gave the warning earlier. So let's get into the characters now. Who do you guys think the protagonist is, Andrew? What are your thoughts?
Well, I would say it's the brothers, but...
That's because you're partial to Christian Bale.
Well, I think that the reason why I think there's the protagonist as the brothers is that the character or Hugh Jackman's character, I'm forgetting his name.
Robert Angier.
Yeah, Angier. He ends up being the antagonist by the end of the film. Now, granted, I think it's intentional that as the film progresses, you're not sure who's telling the truth is intentional. But I think by the end of the film, the fact that Angier ends up being the one who's so consumed with this pursuit of notoriety and becoming the best and outdoing his competitor, I think is a stronger argument for him being the antagonist of the film. Now you can go back and forth as the film progresses as to who it is, but I think by the end, I think he ends up being the antagonist.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can make a strong case for that, but I see Avalon has a little bit of a doubting look on his face. You wanna provide the alternative thoughts there?
I would only argue that the movie consistently, if there's a point of view character, it's Robert Angier. Like, we're definitely getting a lot of his perspective throughout the movie with snippets of Alfred Borden's character. We're getting, so it's mostly, even though you get the idea that Robert Angier is probably more of the antagonist, the villain, because of his actions, he's actually more of the POV character throughout most of the movie. That doesn't necessarily make him a good character. In fact, by the end, he's done some despicable things. Now, that being said, I would argue that the brothers, Alfred Borden and Robert Angier, are both doing despicable things to each other, because the brothers they have done some pretty despicable things themselves throughout the movie just to get at Angier. And so I have a hard time saying either of them are like the bad guy, so to speak, or the villain. So, in fact, they both suffer in their own ways over the course of the movie. So I have a hard time saying which one's the actual protagonist. If I had to choose, I probably would lean towards Hugh Jackman just because he is the POV character. So...
Sure, and maybe just to add on to that, the idea is that you don't necessarily have to have a protagonist who's a good character, right? The antagonist can be the good character, and the protagonist can be the bad character. I mean, you see examples of bad protagonists in stories such as A Christmas Carol, right? That's the classic one, where you have Ebenezer Scrooge, who's not this good guy, but everything's told from his perspective, and he's clearly the one that the story's about. So it's not that that's a necessary thing. There's a difference between a hero and a villain, and a protagonist and antagonist, right? Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment is another great example of that. But there's, a lot of examples where there is the alternative. That being said, I think that there is a decent case to be saying that both of these characters are bad characters. And sure, it starts off mild where it's an accident, right? And you see that from the beginning with the character of Angier's wife. Before they're both magicians or up-and-coming stagehands who help and assist a magician at the beginning of the film. And in the middle of that, Robert Angier's wife dies, and it gets blamed in Angier's mind on, what's his name?
Alfred
Borden. Right, so Borden's character ends up being blamed for that, and the question is, did he do it intentionally, or not intentionally, but did he tie a incorrect knot because he wanted to see it, he thought that knot was better, right? And then that ended up leading to her death. That's more or less the question, and you don't get a clear answer to that. They have indications, but they don't have a clear answer, and from there it devolves, where you have Angier coming over and trying to thwart one of Borden's tricks where he shoots at him and ends up making him lose 2 fingers. And then you have the situation in Retaliation where Borden comes to one of Angier's shows and ends up thwarting it by destroying the cage that has the bird and getting one of the other people who comes up on stage hurt. And then it just devolves from there as each of them starts retaliating in different ways to ruin the other person's act in different ways. So they're both going to nefarious acts.
Yeah.
Personally, I think if you want to go in regards to who's good or who's bad, I think at the end of the day, the film comes to the conclusion that the real enemy here is themselves.
Yes.
But the initial combative element of the entire thing is between these two characters. So even if you want to take that one's a protagonist or one's the antagonist, I think that's fine. You would simply look at the other one as the opposing force to each other, and then just see that as a result of how each of them plays out.
Yeah.
So
well, I think according to the themes of the movie, they both are the protagonists because they both go through the same kind of arc in a way, come to the same place.
Oh, for sure.
By the end.
Yeah. And we can get into like the ramifications of that and how it terminates by the end of this discussion. But for starters, let's talk about Angier's
do they all?
Because
do
it's
they
where
both
you
come
get
to
most...
the same result? Because only one of the twins dies.
We'll get to that. All right. So we'll talk about that at the end. But let's talk about the development of these characters first, right? You have Robert Angier. You see him he's the one who's in the water tank at the beginning of the film, the one who looks like he's drowning, as Borden tries to get him out and is unable to. And then Borden gets accused of killing Robert Angier and goes to jail. And he's tried for this crime. What are your thoughts on Angier? Because most of this is told from his perspective. He clearly looks like he's this one who is consumed after the death of his wife with trying to become the better magician. Do you think he's a compelling character? Do you not? What are your thoughts, Evelyn?
I think he's fairly compelling. I mean, you definitely have the idea where it's like, I mean, his reasoning makes sense, where it's like he loves his wife and then she gets killed, possibly because Alfred Borden decided to go do his own thing and do his own knot instead of what they were supposed to do. That may have been the reason she died in his mind. So like his anger against Alfred Borden is understandable. And now he goes to, it leads him to go to extreme lengths into this like infatuation, this almost like obsession with getting like destroying Borden in a way, being better than him. It's like, so it leads to some terrible places, but his motive in a way does make some level of sense. So
yeah. And it starts off pretty much as a vengeful person and then turns into this full-blown rivalry to the degree where he steals the, what do you call it, the diary of Borden, and he's going through it and he gets the secret phrase asking, okay, how do you do your trick? He wants to do the same trick that Borden does, but better. He wants to have the vanishing man and appear from one side of the stage to the other, even better than Borden does it. And he wants to know, how does Borden do it? Because he's convinced that Borden's doing it in a better way that's more convincing than the way that he does it. And he can still get the accolades and still get the glory for it. And sure, he has his own way of doing it, but he doesn't feel like it's quite enough. And so when he gets the diary, he gets this diary that says the secret phrase to read the diary is the word Tesla. And this sends him on this whole journey across the ocean to meet Nikola Tesla and try to figure out, how does Borden create the vanishing man trick? And he goes to this well-known scientist to try to figure it out. Did you think that his character's compelling, Andrew?
Angier?
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, I think what makes this movie, one of the reasons it's so good, is Angier and Borden are like the perfect inverse of the other. Angier starts out the family man, and he's not all that interested in this pursuit of magic. And magic costs him the person most important in his life. And that drives him to this like insane pursuit. Borden already has this pursuit, and it costs him the person he loves. And well, the twin who's married to this woman, you end up seeing by the end like he doesn't want that. He wants his daughter, and so he walks away. Presumably, he walks away from the magic act. Well, also, he has no act without his twin brother. So, you could argue he did it by, like, lack of choice. I think it makes more sense, given the scenes that we get with him as, the older version of himself, whatever his name is.
You're talking about
Fallon?
Angier when he's the
No. The
Lord?
old...
About...
I'm talking about Borden, the twin, who's posing as Fallon. Mm-hmm. Well, they switch out, so...
Yeah.
The one who's married to, what's her name, Sarah, and has a daughter, you are given the impression that he values his daughter more than the magic by the end. And you even get that with the one who gets imprisoned, the twin who gets imprisoned. By the end, he's willing to give up the secret because of the role that the daughter would be playing, if that makes sense. And he does that out of love for both his niece and his brother. So, anyways, I think that going back to Angier's character, I think he's great. I think he starts out the happy man that he is with his wife. And like he's kind of just doing this because it's with her, and neither one of them really seem to care about the act itself. They're more interested in each other and being happy, and then she dies. And he becomes obsessed, firstly, with what knot did Borden tie. And Borden doesn't know because Borden wasn't the one who tied it. So it's like whenever he's asking him, he genuinely doesn't know because that version of Borden wasn't the one that tied the knot. And it goes from which knot did you tie to now he's becoming his rival and he shoots off his fingers, and then he wants to do his trick better than him. And the cruel irony of it is he ends up doing the same trick as Borden. He just has a duplicate. It's not his twin brother, but it's just a duplicate. The problem is it's no longer become about just being like rivals with Borden. It's about becoming the best. And it's not just the best anymore. He wants the accolades. No one cares about the man in the box. He wants to be the reappearing man. Borden never cared about that. He just cared about the trick. And so him and his duplicate could switch out too. So it didn't really matter to him. It was just the fact that he could pull this trick off. And so Angier is now driven further and further away from being the man that he was at the beginning to a man who's obsessed. This idea of obsession just consumes him to the point where he's willing to kill himself. So I think it's good.
Yeah, especially because you see a development of his character where he starts off as this person who wants to do it, quote unquote, the right way, right? And you see that when he's first getting started in his career and he re-enlists the help of someone he had worked with previously, John Cutter, to help him to create these new magic tricks. And one of the things that John Cutter pushes him on is this idea that you have to be willing to be cruel to do magic, right? You have to be willing to cross some lines is basically what he's given the impression of. And this starts with this idea of killing a dove, right? And the idea that, okay, well, if you're going to have a dove reappear, character. You need to have two of the same and just kill one of them so the next one can look like it's the same dove that appears out of your hand when the other one vanishes and seemingly who knows where it went to, right? So this is the initial impression, and he goes, oh, I'm not going to do that. But he wants him to be willing to, even though he creates a trick that doesn't actually need that. And this is the start of his descent, right? You get this idea that he starts off with, oh, I'm not willing to do that, but then he gets pushed to the idea of, okay, well, maybe I can, in certain circumstances, do something that might be unpalatable. And then it devolves into a full-on problem where he's literally creating a duplicate of himself later in the film to then shoot that duplicate or kill that duplicate or drown that duplicate so that the act can continue and he can be this manifestation in another area and just wow the audiences as he appears behind them. Like, how is that possible so quickly? Well, it's because he is creating a literal second copy of himself that he then murders. So yeah, it's such a devolvement of his character, and it just goes by this fascination.
Think is interesting. Oh, sorry, you cut out.
Yeah, well, and I think some of that too is just the idea that between the two, you look at where their proficiency lies, and that's one of the things that's great about this whole story is that even though they both have similar drives as the film progresses to be the best magician, in some ways they each have different specialties, if you will, where Borden is this one who's really good at the technique of doing the magic trick versus Angier is much better at the presentation of the magic trick. And so he is consumed with this idea of, oh, I need to have not just the best presentation, but I need to have the best technique, which he's not as good at. Versus Borden, his shows suffer because he doesn't have the best presentation, and so he needs help to rise in regards to how he presents himself on stage. And these different things end up they grow in these different ways, but as they grow they also devolve as characters. So Angier's is probably the biggest manifestation of that, especially because you get that POV of him where you see him saying, oh, I need to know the technique. I need to know the technique. All right, I'm going to go to this man Tesla and figure out the technique. I'm going to steal his diary to get this technique. You know, I'm going to get him in prison so that I can get him to tell me the technique, right? All of these things he's doing is because he's consumed with this idea so much to the point that everything else falls away in his mind.
Well, it's almost like by the end, when he gets him in prison, it's not even about the technique anymore. It's just he hates him. He wants him dead. And you get that in the scene when he gives him the trick. He's like, this is how I do it. Here you go. And he tears it up. He's like, I don't care. I don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
My trick is better.
And that's the thing, is like it has devolved even to the point of not am I just a great magician or am I the better magician, but it's like the envy has driven him so much to the degree that it's like, I cannot even have you as a competitor anymore. You just cannot exist on this world because of who you are, and you are such a thorn in my side. So yeah, he devolves so much in his mind that everything else falls away. Anyways, what are your guys' thoughts on Borden as a character? I know, Andrew, you had a few thoughts there. Did you have any additional thoughts on Borden? Clearly, he comes from a different vantage point, and you say that he develops differently. Is that, do you have any more to say on who he is as a character in this film?
I think it's hard to talk about Borden and not talk about the twist and how his character develops, because my favorite part of any movie is the characters and how they develop. And so if you have bad character development, I'm going to hate the movie. If you have good character development, I'm going to love it. And so Borden's character consistently confused me throughout this film, to the point where, like, as soon as they had the dove trick and they started foreshadowing that, I became convinced there was just two of him. Like, the line that did it for me was when his wife says there are some days when you mean it and some days you don't. And I was like, okay, so there's clearly just two of him at this point. I thought by the end of the film that it was a clone. The twin brother idea kind of left once the clones were introduced, as I said before. But it makes for such an interesting dynamic as the film progresses, because you almost get the idea that, like, he's just an absolute scumbag as the movie progresses, with him cheating on his wife, with the way that he acts around certain people, his mannerisms, him not knowing But like that's what makes the reveal so rewarding, is it's like a million different light bulbs go off for the things that he has done throughout this film, from tying the knot to not knowing why the knot was tied, to the entire existence of the character of Fallon. His reaction when he realized Fallon was buried alive. It's like, no, this isn't just a helper. This is my twin brother. And we are so tight that it's not just like a brotherly relationship. It is like, this is the only man in the world who knows my secret. And I am a man who lives by secrets. And you can see the pain in his eyes. And what's the reason it's done so well is because there are moments when Sarah asks him to tell her the secret, and he doesn't look as pained about it. And then there are other moments where you can tell it is like absolutely tearing him up inside. And you get the same thing with Scarlett Johansson's character, where the one twin who is in love with her is torn up about it, and the twin who isn't is kind of like, whatever. So the character of Fallon too is, as you watch the film, the camera is like panning in such a way that it's almost like you're being misdirected in real time, because his character is never put in a suspicious light. He's like always just there. He doesn't talk. I don't think he talks like almost at all in the film. They foreshadow the twist though, in the sense that they have the same build, and there are shots in the movie where you're not sure who it is, and you're like, I'm not sure who that is. We'll have to wait and see. But you're not thinking about it in terms of, are they the same person? You're thinking of it in terms of, this is just a tense scene, and we're being shown it from the dark, and it's like in the dark. We just can't tell. So it's great there.
One of the other things, just briefly about Fallon's character, is the double, who constantly has this makeup on, who constantly has the prosthetics that make him look like he's someone different, are done so well, just because it's such a transformation for Christian Bale's look that it's very hard to tell that it's Christian Bale whenever you look at him. And part of that is very intentional, because there's only one scene before the end of the film, as at least that I can recall, where he actually looks at the camera. And if you're looking for him, you can see Christian Bale's eyes and you know it's Christian Bale. But if you aren't looking for that, it's very hard to tell that it's Christian Bale that is actually the character of both Fallon and also of Borden. So yeah, I mean, in regards to him, he's so subtle in the side, and they don't focus on him intentionally because it's part of this big reveal later where he is actually the brother, the identical twin.
Yeah. It's like the perfect example of misdirection in the film. You have the like bird trick at the beginning when the little boy asks, where's his brother? Also a great foreshadowing thing there. You have Borden's devotion when he tells, I think it's his wife, he says it takes sacrifice. He's literally only living half a life. Also, the fact that nobody knew he had a twin brother even pre this trick means he was planning this for a while, probably, I'm assuming. Which means both the brothers... Which would
explain why he's so consumed from the start of the film with magic, especially compared to Angier.
Yeah. And he never breaks character, not once. Both the brothers have like become the mirror image of the other, to the extent that they are playing an act the entire time. Like it's not just playing the part of Borden. The part of Borden is the act in and of itself. And so it's just done so well. And I think the scene, one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when Borden is fighting with Fallon. I'm going to call them Fallon and Borden, okay, to differentiate them. Fallon's the one who's married to Sarah. Borden's the one who's in love with Scarlett Johansson's character. When Borden's character is fighting with Sarah, and they're like screaming, and it's this super emotional scene for her, and Fallon just comes up and picks up the little girl. Like, in that moment, it encapsulates like everything about Fallon's character. Fallon's character, what we are given the impression of is when he meets Sarah and he has this daughter, this becomes almost as important as the trick to him. And And I think at the moment when it costs him his wife is when it starts to supersede that for him, because he realizes this is no longer just an act, and it's no longer just like, this isn't a harmless or a victimless act anymore. This is costing people their life, to the point that my wife thought I was cheating on her, and she had no reason to live anymore. So, and you get that too when Fallon is now portraying Borden, and he goes to see Scarlett Johansson's character, and he's like completely detached. He just does not care, and it's the only time we really see him start to break. I would argue we see him start to break character.
Yeah, for sure. Alan, what are your thoughts on Borden in this film?
Well, for one thing, I didn't guess that Borden. So even though there is all this foreshadowing about Borden having a twin brother, it didn't hit me till the end of like. So the thing that about this movie that is, unless this movie you think is settled, because I think the thing about this movie is that you think it's settled in reality at first, because you definitely get this whole thing of like, it's all magic, there's illusion, there has to be an explanation. And so even when Cutter says that he has to be using a twin and Angier rejects it, they're literally told right then how Borden does his trick.
Yep.
But, and then there's all these like little signs that don't make any sense, but they could be explained by other means. Like, even though Borden, like, they could be explained by a twin, like the whole relationship between Olivia, Scarlett Johansson's character, and Sarah, like the two different relationships. The other explanation is that Borden has like schizophrenia, or is like cheating on his wife and is like trying to handle two relationships at once. So like, it's not like, oh, it's obviously a twin situation. There are other like realistic explanations as well, which just make Borden's character in the moment look worse, if that's the explanation. Furthermore, like, when you get to the part with Tesla and he creates the cloning machine, and you start to see, like, suddenly you've exited reality in the viewer's minds. Like, now we're no longer in a version of the late 1900s. Now you have this, like, quasi sci-fi element as well, because now there's cloning involved. And so at that point, it's highly plausible in the viewer's mind that Borden is cloning himself or doing something similar, because now that's a part of this world now. So the whole idea that he's a twin, it creates distance between what is the truth and what you're presented in a way. So it's good misdirection, and it makes the reveal more impactful for someone who's not paying attention or not, like, doesn't realize that's the case. So as far as the plot twist goes, it's an excellent plot twist. I would also say regarding Borden's character is that, because you're given the scene at the beginning of the Chinese magician, and they're talking about how he lives his act, like how he's a cripple or something, just so he can do the trick on stage or something. And that is literally Borden's character, where he's like living for the magic trick. But in the end, it also is what ends up costing him, because it's like, because the two brothers are so devoted to this bit, it makes them look like they're cheating on his wife and having like an affair with Olivia's character, when it's really two different relationships. So when Sarah kills herself, it's like they literally caused her to commit suicide in a way. Like the whole like cost of them putting this up is like, it makes them look like a terrible person to everyone else. And furthermore, and on top of everything else they're doing to Angier to sabotage his act.
Well, and it makes sense, because you see scenes where Borden is very angry, and he's acting out in anger. And so the idea that he would also act out in anger against his wife makes sense in the context of everything is going on. But there's also these other hints. And so the idea that it could be reasonable to say that he is just this person and he's actually just doing these terrible things does align with the idea that of what's going on. And so, like you were saying
we've
earlier,
already
when
established
John Cutter
the rivalry.
says that,
Yeah.
Yeah. But when,
So-
when John Cutter says he's using a double, and he just keeps saying that he's using a double, the whole thing is like, this is once again a scene where they have you lose the forest for the trees because you just sit there and you go, there's no way, because he had two fingers shot off, and you only one of them could have had two fingers shot off. It's not like both people would have that same problem, so it's not possible, right? And so
Yeah.
you look for all of the clues and you go, these just don't add up. And so they give you enough little hints to make you disbelieve the plain fact that is being told you from the start of the film of what is actually going on.
Yes. And just to play into like the character arcs real quick, because they both pursue magic and they're clearly trying to sabotage each other and like prove the other is better, but in a way their own trick is their own downfall, because it's like they've been playing this act of being the same person this whole time. So when one of them is accused of the murder, it's like, and it's no differentiation. There's like, it's what leads to the one dying, being hanged. And then in the case of Angier, it's like, he's got this cloning machine where he has to kill one of himself every single time. So in a way, his own trick leads to his own death, because
Yeah.
so it's almost like poetic justice in both cases.
Yeah. And you see, even in regards to Borden, his character, just another great hint from the start is the fact that this is the path he's been on from the start, is what you mentioned earlier, the Chinese magician, when they're talking about the trick and how it works. And Angier is explaining to his wife before she dies, oh, it had to be this way. And he goes, yeah, I didn't catch it at all. But Borden knew it from the start. He instantly knew it. And he goes, oh, well, how would he know that? Well, maybe it's because he's been doing this trick his entire life and he's been living by this. So to see it in someone else is a no-brainer for him, because he's been playing this facade of acting like he's one way when he's really completely different from the beginning of this entire film. So yeah, there's so many things that they add there. There's little tidbits that are just so good. And in some ways, yeah, I think that the scene with Tesla applies to both of them, where you see Angier goes to Tesla and he goes, oh, I want this machine. And Angier says this to Tesla, and then Tesla responds by saying, you know that ambition is going to destroy you. And he goes, well, if you know anything about ambition, you know that I'm already down, like, committed to this path. There's no way I'm going to do anything different. And Tesla basically says, yeah, I know. So I've already started working on it. And that's the thrust of the film going forward, is how much this ambition is going to tear both of them down and destroy them. So, do you think that plays into the themes of this film, Avalon? What are your thoughts on the themes?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, no, it just how I mean, it's the whole like idea of like, I mean, this whole rivalry, like trying to outdo the other, the ambition. It leads to the, like, at the end, neither of them can do this act. They were trying to do, like, they got to the end, like their magic is gone essentially for both of them, and they've both lost everything in a way. The only one who has something by the end is Alfred Borden, or Fallon Borden, like whoever. Like, one of them now has to take care of his niece, like he has family, but he's now essentially playing the role of the father now, and he knows it. So it's like, but other than that, they've both lost everything. So this whole rivalry cost them, this ambition, it destroyed them.
Yeah. This undying enmity, this envy and rivalry between them has been spurned forward by this ambition, to the point that they both have lost so much of what they originally valued to begin with.
Well,
Andrew,
both of them were so intent on creating the disappearing man trick that they both disappeared in the end.
Exactly. Andrew, do you have additional thoughts on the themes of this film?
The theme of obsession is clearly, I think, the theme they're going for, and this question of, like, how far are you willing to go in the pursuit of greatness? Yeah, it's just like the cost of ambition, this obsession, sacrifice, And then you also get like this idea of the illusion versus the truth, and then obsession kind of interplays with that. So I think the themes are great. I think they fully explore it with the characters of Angier and Borden, and you get that too. This idea of obsession and how far are you willing to go within the twins themselves too, because the twin that is Fallon, the more cautious of the two, is the one that survives, and the one who plays Borden, the more the more ambitious of the two, I would say, is the one who ends up going backstage after the one who plays Fallon says it's not worth it. We're not going to go backstage. It's fine. It's it. We're going to let him have his trick. We're done. And the one who's more ambitious, his obsession ends up costing him, just as it costs Angier. And then the one who finally realized, of the three, because there's really three of them, that it was no longer worth the cost because it cost him his wife, is the one who ends up walking away at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, obviously ambition's a very strong theme in this film, and how ambition destroys you if you follow it too far down the path. And that's what you get with this film. I kind of take the stance that both of them are acknowledging that it's destroyed them, and they're simply trying to have the last bit, right? The last hurrah, if you will, against the other by the end. And you see that by the fact that Fallon goes and shoots Angier at the end of the film. And even though he's acknowledged, okay, yes, maybe this wasn't the right path, and he was the first one to realize the true cost of this by saying, hey, we shouldn't continue to goad him, we shouldn't continue down this path. I mean, look what happened to my wife. You still get him at the end of the day going, well, screw you, you deserve to die, just like you're trying to kill me and trying to kill my legacy, right? And so at the end of the day, it's almost like, even though both of them, to some degree, even with Angier and this idea that he realizes he's lost so much and he's lost everything to some degree, he ends up trying to go off on his own life in his own secluded way as the new great Lord Caldlow, and he decides to say, well, my last laugh is going to be, I have custody of your daughter and I'm going to raise her, screw you guys, I win in the end. And so the end of the day, you see both of them are trying to still one up the other, even as they try to exit scene by the end. And so that's where I get the impression that it's like they have acknowledged the fact that they have messed up, that ambition has destroyed them. But at the end of the day, they still cannot let go of being the one who has the final say. And that's where they go off and try to ruin the other person's life. So I don't think that the ending of this film is very hopeful. I don't think that it's one that goes, oh, like this is a very happy way to end things. But it's a sobering message, this idea that ambition will destroy you, that there's this undying desire that consumes you is not a good thing. But the way that it plays out is they've committed to it so long that they can't help but try to see it through to the end.
I mean, I would add, I think the second Borden twin that kills Angier is not doing it so much out of a place of rivalry at this point, as much as it is just the cycle needs to end, and his daughter, he wants his daughter, and currently Angier has custody of her. And as long as Angier has custody of her, he doesn't get access to her. And so this has become more, his actions following the death of his wife are almost completely driven by the protection of what he cares about now, which is his daughter. And so him deciding that it's no longer worth the pursuit when it comes to Angier is driven by him not wanting his daughter to be driven away. Him staying hidden and like not coming out of the shadows, I think, is also more of a him hoping something happens with Angier and his brother, and then he only really does when his brother's dead now. And it's almost like he's kind of pulling the same card Angier did, where Angier reestablishes himself as someone else now that his double is dead. And the other twin is like, all right, my twin is dead. Angier clearly is so far gone that he's willing to kill me. I'm never going to be able to get to have my daughter. And you get that line from Cutter where he says, she'll be fine. And he says, she needs her dad. She needs her father. And so, not that the second Borden twin is necessarily being altruistic or like a good guy, but I think it's less so about this idea of competition with Angier at that point, and more so he is driven by this singular goal of protecting his daughter.
Sure. I mean, I think that is definitely an interpretation to take. I think that there are other scenes and ideas at the end as well that could be taken the other way. For example, the fact that he has everything burn that remains of Angier's stuff, or at least lets it burn, is this idea that he wants to wipe away any semblance of the existence of Angier and his work in the world, and wants to exit scene as the better one at the end. So I generally think that the impression and indications of the scenes are not one of someone who has altruistic motives in this film. He wants to be the one that wins at the end of the day, and that's what she gets. So, I mean, either way, you still get the conclusion that both of these people are destroyed by the ambition that they have, and that it ends up being their undoing. And they have regrets. They have things they did not want to happen at the end, and they have to live with those regrets or die by those regrets by what the consequences are for their actions. So, still, regardless of how you take it, I mean, if you take Andrew's side or if you take mine and Avalon's side, you still get a sobering idea that you do not want ambition to be this thing that consumes you to the degree that you are crossing lines. And that's what they learn.
Yeah, and I mean, even when Borden does kill him, regardless of whether or not you think it's out of revenge or to protect his daughter, he's like completely emotionless. He's just so emotionally dead inside, and the only emotion you're getting from him is just exhaustion. Like the way he carries himself, the way he shoots him, it's very much just matter of fact, the way he's doing it. And he just leaves. He's like, I'm done with this. This has taken so much from me. The only chance I have of getting any semblance of a life with my daughter is to just leave it all behind.
Yep, absolutely. With that, I do think that that's most of the film. I want to touch on some of those side characters, get you guys' thoughts on them. What are your thoughts on John Cutter, Avalon? He's the main assistant to Angier, and he eventually flips at the very end and ends up helping Borden in the infiltration of Angier's place to basically to kill him. What are your thoughts on John Cutter in this film?
I mean, all the side characters in this movie are fairly well developed, given like each have their own motive, what they're doing. Because John Cutter is he's a magician in his own right. He's like the man that Borden and Angier are apprenticed to. Like, they help him out the beginning, and then Angier and Cutter kind of maintain this like relationship after Angier's wife's death. But even then, Cutter has a line in the sand, and so when it becomes clear to Cutter that Angier is like pursuing this like rivalry, pursuing this like revenge in a way, he decides, I can't follow you on this path anymore. Like, because he goes to America, he's like, I can't go with you. I'm staying here, more or less. And when he comes back, like, he's willing to help Angier, but he's like not really involved with Angier's like act. He doesn't know all the details. So, I mean, not that he doesn't try to find out, but there's definitely like, but the point is that Cutter's character has his own motive. He has his own reasons for being like, for what he does. And honestly, I just like Michael Caine as an actor. He's a great actor. So
So does Christopher Nolan, apparently. He has him in so many of the films that he does.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just Christopher Nolan and Michael Caine get along, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a ton to add. I think Cutter is the one character who consistently has a line that he's drawing in the sand, and he's like, it's not like you get to see that line explored until towards the end, but the way that he talks, he carries, or the dialogue and the conversations he has are very indicative of someone who clearly is, he has elements of both Borden and Angier, where Borden is obsessed with the craft itself, and Angier is obsessed with the glory that you gain from it. And Cutter likes the accolades and he likes the craft, but he doesn't allow it to consume him. And so he is the better version of both of them. And you can see that in that he's reached his old age and he's successful when we begin the movie. Like, he clearly has done well for himself. And you get that from, like, the conversation at the very beginning where he's like, these tricks aren't amazing, but they're not dangerous for the most part to the person who's taking part in them. And then when it does cost someone their life, like, I don't know that he walks away. I know he has to walk away because it's like no one wants to hire him for the most part.
Well, his name has been tarnished at that point.
Yeah. But you also see, like, when he realizes that the trick is going poorly, he does not hesitate to, like, reveal how the trick works. And that is the stark difference between him and Angier and Borden. Angier and Borden were willing to go to greater lengths. Angier to the extent of literally killing himself.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think he's great. He mirrors the two main characters, if you will, throughout the film, in such a way that you have a contrast in ideas as well.
Yeah. Well, he's also got this idea that he's a voice of reason, that he has this idea that he can see what's reasonable and what's not. And you see that, like you just said, where he's willing to reveal the trick for the sake of keeping someone alive. But he's also the one who can see a trick for what it is, right? He's been around. He knows how things work. And so he's the one who's saying from the start, hey, sometimes lines have to be crossed with the doves, right? Which is why he has some element of not necessarily being the best person, but he also has some level of, like, reasonability. At the same time, he's not willing to kill people, right? He has that line as well. And then he goes into these ideas of, he can see what the trick is. It's very straightforward to him, and he's just going to accept it for what it is. He's not going to try to build this up in his mind to be something that it's not. And so he does see the forest instead of getting caught up in seeing the individual trees, to try to see that technique that Angier is trying to find. And so at the end of the day, he's willing to walk away as he ought to before it's too late, which these other characters are just not willing to do. So I think that he's a great sounding board. They use him very well in the film, and he plays a pivotal role in this film to the degree that he's, in some ways, even at the end, I think that's the only part where he really changes, where he gets so angry about the vengefulness of Lord Caldlow / Robert Angier that he ends up saying, well, screw you. More or less, you deserve to have your life ruined too. I'm going to let this other guy in. And he helps Borden to infiltrate Angier's location. So, yeah, great character. What are your guys' thoughts on Olivia Wenscombe, also played by Scarlett Johansson? Do you think she is a compelling character, Andrew? And if you want to talk about the wife, Julia McCullough, no, not Julia McCullough, that's the wife who dies in the water tank. Sarah Borden as well. That's appropriate.
I think she's interesting. I don't know that she's meant to play that big of a role in the film. She serves the purpose of enabling Borden to grow in his theatrics. She serves the role of being the love interest of one of the Borden twins and furthering this whole idea of the double life. Of the four that are in this weird kind of relationship of the two Borden twins and then her and then Sarah, she is truly the scumbag, I would say, because she is the one who thinks that she's causing a married man to cheat and does it anyways. I think her character is interesting. I didn't put a ton of weight on her character because I think she's not like the main focus of the film, if that makes sense. Like, you get Angier, you get Borden, you get Cutter, and Sarah to a lesser extent, because one, she's in the film for a longer period of time, but she also has a lot more emotional impact on the actual progression of the film.
Yeah, and I think that she's definitely both a tool for the storytelling, but then also a tool for both of the characters in the film as they use her to achieve their own ends, whether that's to make their show better or to try to infiltrate their opponent. She realizes that she's being used to a certain degree and ends up deciding that she needs to exit scene in a way that in a similar way, but not quite the same way as John Cutter's, where she realizes this is just not good. It's not good for me. It's not good for either of you. And this is just not worth being a part of anymore. And she ends up leaving both of them at one point in the film or another. So, what are your thoughts, though, Avalon?
I mean, of the two, what you have, I mean, they're both different characters. I mean, Sarah is clearly like the woman who marries Alfred Borden, thinking that he is the magician, not knowing his actual secret that he has a twin brother. Olivia loved Angier first, feels jilted by him because he is so obsessed with getting revenge on Borden that she ends up betraying him in a way to go to Borden's side, but then also falls in love with one of the brothers, not knowing that it's one like brothers either. So it's like Sarah and Olivia are motivated by sort of different things or different situations. But you also get the impression that Sarah is actually trying to be a good wife and also does want Alfred Borden to love her. And when she thinks he doesn't love her anymore and is like this is why she's going after Olivia, and she doesn't get like closure, doesn't get like the secret from Alfred, like clearly from Borden, I mean. But essentially, she feels like she is no longer wanted by Borden. And then it's his secret that he's refusing to share with her. So she ends up killing herself in his like lab. I forget what you call it, the backstage area of his magic place. So, and it's part of the cost of Borden keeping this secret. In a way, I mean, it's part of the story, like showing how Borden playing this part costs him in the end, like how much it leads to loss for him. So, I mean, that's really what Olivia's and Sarah are. There are characters who show what Borden is losing over the course of the movie. So that is their role in the story, but they are their own characters who are motivated by their own desires. So
yeah, they show the sacrifice of keeping secrets and how, this drive for ambition terminates in some very bad things in regards to relationships, right? Not just that you lose a finger or that you're bad at a trick or that you hurt the people who are watching. It goes further where you ruin your relationships with the people you care about to the degree where they leave you or they die. And it's a very sobering progression for each of these characters as they continue to go down this path, and it results in the loss of love in multiple different scenarios. So it's just unideal in so many different ways, but they're so committed to their craft that they are willing in some ways to lose these people for the sake of their ambition. And it furthers the themes, it furthers the ideas of the film, that furthers the plot. Like, they are not the primary characters of the film, but they add a lot in regards to the emotional stakes and the gravity of what's going on. And so they're very critical to showing us how bad it is to be so driven by ambition that you're blind to everything else.
And just to close it out, I'm just going to say that as far as all the side characters go, I think they're all very well developed for this movie. They all add something to the story while still maintaining their own unique characteristics and motives. I have a hard time looking at any of the side characters who have a part, I'm going to say. Any of the side characters who have a part in the story, like, they all have their own unique motive, their own, like, thing that drives them. And it's, like, either it's hinted at or it's, like, shown, and it's, like, you don't get, like, cardboard cutouts anywhere in this movie. So the side characters are very well done in this movie.
I wanted to touch on Borden real quick, because there's something that I wrote down that I think it's one of the themes that is not as obvious, but it's this theme of identity and losing oneself in the pursuit of obsession. And both Borden and Angier lose themselves. Angier loses himself in the sense that he loses his humanity. Borden loses himself in that he loses his identity. And you get this in multiple ways. You get it, one, in that literally, well, they never confirm which of the Bordens ties the knot. And it's like they share everything so much so that they become the same person, and yet they are only living half a life. They also never give names to either one of the Bordens. You just have Borden and Fallon. But because they're interchanging both of those so much, they're not really that person, if that makes sense. They are one and the same. And so he completely loses his identity. And one of the things that I think makes the end so interesting for the Borden twin that has a daughter is his identity is no longer Borden or the magician. His identity is wrapped up in his daughter now. And so he has lost so much of who he is, was, will be, that the only semblance of a person that he has now outside of his twin is this daughter. And so that's why, in my mind, the idea that he's so strongly pursuing protecting his daughter is, it's not solely an altruistic goal. It is also, he is pursuing this because it's the only semblance of humanity he has left. So I just think it's interesting, the idea of identity and losing oneself too, because it's almost like a subplot within the greater plot, but they do it so well with the character of Borden in that they leave so much ambiguous about which is which. I mean, we struggled throughout the entire podcast to differentiate the two, and I think that goes to show just how well that's done.
Yeah. Quick correction there. They do have first names of Alfred and Frederick, but it is only mentioned once in the film, and that goes back to the point that you're saying, is that, yes, their identities are completely subsumed in each other, and you really can't tell which is which throughout the film, partially because they're both played by Christian Bale, but also because they are very much identical to each other in how they're acting, except for when they're in private, and that's when you get the interactions between the love interests. So, 100%. With that being said, what are your thoughts on the lasting impact of this film? Do you think this film has a lasting impact? Alan, what are your thoughts?
I mean, if you look up Christopher Nolan, I mean, this is definitely one of those movies. I mean, it's not the top movie that shows up, obviously, but I mean, it is like after you go through his like top movies, this is probably comes up pretty soon after that. So, it's probably not it's definitely for audiences. I would say it's not the first thing comes to mind for most people, but it is a movie that does show up and people do seem to know it. So, and it does get referenced. So, yeah, it has an impact. So, maybe not as much as some of his other movies, but definitely has an impact.
Sure. Andrew, what are your thoughts?
I struggled with thinking about this in terms of Christopher Nolan films because, well, I should preface this, by the way. The one gripe I have with this film, which is so minor, but it was just enough that in the moment it was off-putting, is the inclusion of the science fiction or the supernatural, because the entire film is like premised on the idea that this is all grounded in reality. I understand that it's there as like a misdirection, and I still like it. I think just the inclusion of the supernatural is just enough to take me out of the movie momentarily. So it puts it not quite at a perfect 9 for me. I don't know if I enjoyed watching Inception for the first time as much as I enjoyed watching this for the first time, though. As much as I love Inception, and I think it is a better movie, I think I enjoy this one more. I think the reason why is I enjoy Christian Bale as an actor more so. I find him to be, he evokes emotion in such a way that I just find it so much more compelling and enjoyable to watch. That's not to take away from Leonardo DiCaprio. I think he's also a great actor, and I think Inception's a phenomenal movie. I also think Shutter Island's a phenomenal movie. Like, I think Leonardo DiCaprio has a lot of great movies. I think he does a good job. I just think of all of the actors in Hollywood, if you were to ask me and just expect an answer off rip, I would probably say Christian Bale is my favorite actor. And so him and his performances make movies like just so enjoyable for me. I mean, you've got the Dark Knight trilogy, you've got this movie. There was another one I was thinking of and I completely lost it that I also really like with Christian. Oh, Ford versus Ferrari. I don't know that movie is all that amazing, but his performance just makes it so enjoyable to watch. So in terms of the enjoyment, I think that's probably a big thing. I was thinking over why Inception might be more successful, even though I think this film easily rivals it in terms of how good it is. And I think it might just be or one element of it could be the visuals. I think the visuals in Inception are just really good. The music in Inception is really good. There are just so many things that add to the ambiance of Inception that just completely suck the audience in and like enthrall them from start to finish. And I think Inception's also just genuinely a masterpiece, so you get that from it. I also am a sucker for plot twists, so that's probably why I enjoyed this one more. Even though Inception has great plot twists, this one just takes plot twists to a whole nother level. I don't even know if Christopher Nolan will outdo himself with Inception, to be quite honest with you. I think Inception and Interstellar are probably his two best works, and there's a reason those two are the most widely recognized of his portfolio, if you will. But this film is definitely amazing, and if you haven't watched it and you listen to this podcast before watching it, you're stupid, and shame on you. I hope you get Alzheimer's so you can go watch it again. Matter of fact, I'm not gonna lie. Old Andrew, if I got dementia, I'd low-key be celebrating, and I'd go watch Attack on Titan, I'd go watch The Prestige, I'd go watch Inception again, I'd probably go watch Star Wars again. Shoot, bro, I'd be like having dementia, going, wow, Star Wars was so amazing, then look around my room and go, wow, I have so many cool Star Wars things in here, how did that happen? And it'd be like a brand new experience every day. Dementia Andrew would probably be the happiest person on the planet. I would probably just make myself a list of movies to watch, pin it to my wall, and then just watch them in succession. Anyways,
every week just re-enjoying life again.
Angie's the only person I know who gets the doctor prognosis, you have dementia. He's like, yes!
Yeah.
Yes, no, the film, I mean, I think this one, there's a reason people like this one a lot, especially if you talk to film buffs who love Christopher Nolan. It's not unsurprising for them to pull this one out and be like, oh, isn't this such a good, somewhat niche film? And you go, well, it's not exactly niche. People know about it. They just don't know about it as much as, say, these other great works of Christopher Nolan, such as Inception and Interstellar, which have hit the main screen for a good long time. But I think in some ways, this one even helped pave the way for people to know Christopher Nolan's got great work, so that when he kept outdoing himself for those good, that 10-year period where he came out with Inception and Interstellar and The Dark Knight, that you were just like, wow, Christopher Nolan can't miss, right? So I think that there's a lot of great things that he's released, and this is no exception to that rule. Such a great film. I even just love how the film, in some ways, is the whole magic act in the whole creation of the film, where you have the development of the plot in the pledge, and then you have the turn where you have these magic abilities of cloning and things coming around, and then you have the prestige of the film at the end when you have the revelation that you have this character of Borden and he has a brother, and like all of these elements that are in the idea of magic and misdirection, and how there is the misdirection built in the plot where they're telling you what's going on, but you don't believe it because you're being misdirected by the things such as the cut off fingers. And so, yes, the whole film is just a masterpiece in regards to not just the characters and the themes, but also in the very way the whole film was designed to be like an encapsulation of magic. So it's so good. It's worth a watch. If you haven't watched it, you should be in serious trouble. If you've already watched it, you should just watch it again because it's so good. I mean, yes. I will be doing that again at some point, so why not join me in that? And I think that's where we're going to leave it. We all know we like it, and there's a reason, so turn this off, turn on your TV. You know what to do. That's the pod. We hope you all enjoyed. We'll be back, as we always are, next week. We'll see you all then.